You may have been taught or raised to believe that fat will make you, more fat, and that it will clog your arteries, give you heart disease, and make you sick. However, today we're going to explore the health benefits of fat, what kinds are good for you, and what kinds are not so good. Hi, I'm Joy Hoisington, functional nutrition coach and natural culinary specialist. And if you are new here, would you just take a moment to consider hitting subscribe and turning on the notifications bell so that you can be notified of the new videos that I post weekly? Now, fat has mostly got a bad reputation due to the hypothesis that Dr. Ansel Keys proposed in 1953 that death from heart disease was due to saturated fat consumption, and it somehow became ingrained in all the medical communities of that time. However, in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2010, there was a study published looking at over 347,000 participants over a 5 to 23-year period that stated that intake of saturated fat was not associated with an increased risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, or coronary vascular disease. The conclusion stated that there is no significant evidence that concluding that dietary saturated fat intake was associated with an increased risk of CHD or CVD. Now, some other interesting facts about fat consumption in the diet, as stated by world-renowned nutritionist Andrea Nakayama, people groups such as the Greenland Eskimos, the Maasai in northern Kenya and Tanzania, and the desert nomads all have a diet high in saturated fat, but have some of the lowest incidences of, historically speaking, of heart disease. Also in Switzerland during World War II, fat consumption was increased, but then heart disease rates actually decreased during that time period. Now, as science began to shed truth and light about saturated fat intake to the medical communities, this is no longer a common belief amongst informed medical professionals who keep up to date on nutritional literature that saturated fat causes heart disease. Now, first, I want to go over a little science lesson with you. Fats, as they pertain to nutrition, are in the form of triglycerides, which are basically a compound of 3 fatty acids attached to a glycerol molecule. So the fatty acids are the monomer, or the building blocks of each fat molecule. There are more than 20 types of fatty acids in foods. Each fatty acid does something different in the body. Sometimes a fatty acid may convert into a different type of fatty acid in the liver. Some get absorbed into the lymphatic system before going into the bloodstream, and then some go right into the bloodstream. Now, when we digest fats, they are broken down from the triglyceride form into the free fatty acids and utilized by the body for energy. There are different types of fatty acids, ones that are saturated, which basically means saturated in hydrogen, and ones that are unsaturated, or ones that aren't completely saturated with hydrogen. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Some examples are butter, ghee, coconut oil, and lard. Unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature, but depending on the type of unsaturated fat, whether mono or polyunsaturated, they may be solid when refrigerated. For example, olive oil is solid in the refrigerator because it contains mostly monounsaturated fat. Grapeseed oil, however, is mostly polyunsaturated, so it would not be solid in the refrigerator or at room temperature. This is due to the chemical structure and how much hydrogen surrounds the fatty acid molecule. Now, something that is very important to know is that consuming excess carbohydrate or sugar tells the body to create fat, and sugar actually gets stored as a triglyceride in the liver. Something that can commonly happen from excess sugar consumption is fatty liver disease and type 2 diabetes. One way that blood sugar rises into the diabetic range is that the liver becomes so overburdened with stored glucose and triglycerides that the excess sugar molecules have nowhere else to go but to stay in the blood. So if you think that the way to gain fat the fastest is to eat fat, think again. You have to realize that sugar is stored as fat in the liver when you've consumed more than you expend for the day. Another interesting fact is that we can live without sugar, but we can't live without fat. Fat carries fat-soluble vitamins to the tissues in our body, vitamins A, D, E, and K. So essentially, without fat intake in our diet, we would not have healthy bones, eyes, lungs, immune system, or tissues in general. Practically every single cell in our body requires fat-soluble vitamins to function. If you don't have fat, then you don't have fat-soluble vitamin absorption. Fat also acts as an insulator, helping the body to maintain a healthy body temperature and blood circulation. It protects internal organs and helps to maintain healthy cholesterol levels. Stearic, palmitic, and lauric acid, which are found in animal protein and coconut oil, respectively, help to balance cholesterol levels by either lowering the bad cholesterol of LDL or raising the good cholesterol of HDL. Another interesting fact is that butyric acid, which is in butter, a fatty acid in butter, is a preferred nutrient source for good, healthy gut bacteria in the colon. Now keep in mind that getting the right ratio of fats is important. Remember how we talked about the unsaturated versus saturated fat? Well, some sources of saturated fat are going to be animal protein, butter, coconut oil, ghee, cacao, and dairy. And the more of these foods that you consume, the more unsaturated fats you're going to need. And by unsaturated, I mean monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. Some good examples of monounsaturated fats, which are your omega-9s, by the way, are olive oil, almonds, macadamia nuts, and sesame oil. Now, polyunsaturated fats, which are your omega-3s and 6s, are a very important category. And that's because there is a certain ratio needed of omega-6 to omega-3. And I know this gets a little bit complicated. But the American diet over the years have shifted toward a diet higher in omega-6 fats, which have more inflammatory properties when not balanced with the omega-3s. The average ratio right now in America is 13:1 omega-6 to omega-3, and sometimes even higher. But we want that ratio to be as close to 1:1 as we can for the most healthy permeable cell membranes. When our cell membranes become more permeable, it allows for an abundant exchange of nutrients and waste products in our cells. When we have a higher omega-6 than omega-3, or if we have, for example, trans fats in the diet, which I'm going to talk about next, we end up with a stiff, hard cell membranes incapable of functioning well. And that just then sets us up for unhealthy cells that build up with all the wrong things and don't get enough of the right things. I also want to mention that too much of any macronutrient can be bad, and the same goes for fat. This is especially true for those who are not active because you will require less energy to sustain you. When an abundance of saturated fat is in the diet, it can actually begin to cause sticky arteries when it is not being expended or when it's not balanced with the other ratio of healthy fats. Now, although the ratio is important, both omega-6 and omega-3 fats are necessary. Now, there are different types of omega-3 fatty acids, and not all of them have the same function. Some of them are EPA, DHA, and ALA. DHA is only found in fish mostly, which is why fish is a very important staple needed in a healthy diet. When you don't have fish daily in the diet, you need to get that DHA from a supplement, like fish oil, for example. DHA is the type of omega-3 fatty acid that is essential for brain and nervous system function. So if you're someone who struggles with energy, focus, mood, or mental health, you will really want to make sure that you're getting your DHA in some form or another. This is a fish oil supplement that I use because although I do eat fish 3 or 4 times a week, I don't have it every day. And I like this one because the liquid oils have more EPA and DHA in them than the capsules do. Also, it has a citrus or a lemon flavor so that there is no fishy taste. This was actually recommended to me by my functional medicine doctor because my levels were low even though I was taking a fish oil capsule each day. As stated by Dr. Secor, functional medicine doctor, if somebody has a deficiency in omega-3 fats and they start taking a fish oil, a good quality fish oil high in EPA and DHA, they can begin to notice a shift in their mood and mental status in less than a week's time. Now, a different type of omega-3 called ALA that is found in foods such as walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds is another important fatty acid, but it is not the same as the DHA, which is found in fish. But chopped walnuts are great in baked goods. I love to add flax meal to my morning protein shake because of the amazing fiber content. But if you're really focusing on getting as much omega-3 from the flax as possible, I would recommend getting flaxseed oil. It actually has a very nutty flavor and it makes a great base for salad dressing. However, any omega-3 oil is too fragile for cooking, so you're not going to want to cook with something like flaxseed oil, and you're going to want to make sure that you add it to your foods only at room temperature. A few more things you can do to increase your omega-3 content is less grains and more greens. Greens have a higher omega-3 content, while grains have a higher omega-6 content. And this is actually a big reason why so many animal products today are inflammatory, is because of the livestock, they're being fed grains instead of grass, which is their natural preferred source of nutrients. Grass-fed beef, pasture-raised eggs and poultry, and grass-fed dairy products are going to have a higher omega-3 content, which is crucial. Then, of course, focusing on more greens in our diet is going to help us as well. And some sources of omega-6, just so that you know what to watch out for, are corn, soy, cottonseed, safflower, and sunflower oil, which I'm sure you recognize is in a lot of processed foods, which makes matters a little bit more difficult for the omega-6 to 3 ratio. Now, trans fats are absolutely a fat that you want to stay away from. Partially hydrogenated oils and trans fats are one and the same. In 2015, the FDA deemed artificial trans fat unsafe because of their link to heart attacks. Not until 2018 did their policy to eliminate trans fats, or at least to a certain level, go into full effect for the food industry. And unfortunately, even though it's unhealthy, it's very, very tasty and also addictive. It affects the dopamine pathway in our brains, which is the reward pathway. This has led the food industry to take advantage of consumers' health by putting in the most amount of trans fat allowed by the FDA, which is 0.5 grams per serving. There are many packages on the market that can legally state 0 grams of trans fat on the package, both on the front and on the nutrition facts label under trans fats, even though the ingredients could contain up to 0.5 grams of trans fats per serving. Some examples of trans fat ingredients are partially hydrogenated soybean oil or partially hydrogenated cottonseed oil. So basically, any polyunsaturated fat that goes through a chemical process to create a trans fat. And the way that they do this is that they use a metal catalyst for 6 to 8 hours to basically break the double bond to add hydrogen to it. And the metal that can be used can be nickel, platinum, cobalt, and even aluminum. They're terrible for the body because our body can't get rid of them very easily. They're very sticky in our arteries, and they can lead to things like heart attacks and heart disease, even cancer and diabetes due to the way that it affects insulin and hormones. Now, frying polyunsaturated fats at a high heat also can cause trans fats to happen through a physical change. For example, McDonald's recently took out their trans fats containing oils for deep frying and substituted canola oil. But when you deep fry canola oil, which is a polyunsaturated fat, the heat alone is going to cause it to contain trans fats in the end, regardless. So deep fried foods or foods fried at high temperatures very often are going to contain trans fats. They're also commonly in baked goods and pastries. Some states and countries have outlawed trans fats, such as Brazil, Denmark, and Canada, and more recently the US, although the laws still do allow for small amounts of artificial trans fats into the foods. Trans fats negatively impact the essential fatty acid usage in the body, which is how it leads to so many problems. So the key points that you should take away from this are: number 1, fat is a crucial part of a healthy diet. Number 2, the more saturated fat in the diet, the more essential omega fats are needed for a healthy balance. Number 3, aim for plenty of omega-3 fats and limit omega-6 since they are so abundant in the standard American diet. Number 4, the amount of fat in the diet as well as macronutrients should correlate in some fashion with the amount of physical activity you are doing. And number 5, be extremely cautious about trans fats, including how you're cooking your food, how they've been cooked in restaurants, and looking at ingredient labels for partially hydrogenated oils. Also, I have a nice resource here that is going to tell you some examples of healthy fat sources and the exact omega breakdown in each one so that you can plan accordingly with your meals and fat intake. And for those of you who are concerned with your health, wanting to make some changes about your food choices, I would love for you to schedule a free 30-minute assessment session with me so that we can chat and get an idea of what your goals are and some ways that we can make those goals happen. Thank you so much for watching, and for anyone wanting some ideas on how to optimize your health in 3 easy ways, please watch this video here and have a great day.